What's going on, guys? Crypto Coffee here. Today's video is going to be about what is the use case of HEX. So if you've been wondering, or if you're not quite sure yet, if you're not already in HEX, stick around because we're going to talk all about that today. Now, the use case in any cryptocurrency, they're usually all different. Some of them try to compete for the same ones, but in the early days, one of the things I've realized is that they mostly start off as speculation, right? So speculation itself is kind of the early form use case before coins gain maturity, right? So Bitcoin at first, right, it started off, let's say Bitcoin was the 0 point on this timeline, and Bitcoin comes along, and its first use case was digital peer-to-peer cash, right? But that didn't really work out so well for Bitcoin, right? So it changed over time and it morphed into eventually a store of value, right? Which is the use case that everybody likes to talk about today. So that's at a more mature phase when it was finally realizing that. And that's fine. Things can change and morph over time. Now, Ethereum came along a little bit later, and it started off with, a little bit more of an actual use case because you could actually build things on top of Ethereum. Now, in 2017, really the use case was just building other shitcoins because now everybody can do that. But, it kind of started off with a little more utility and eventually progressed into, well, it started off as a world computer. That didn't really work out. Now it's kind of a decentralized finance, right? That's the new narrative. And so it's progressing to a more mature phase and a more mature use case, and it's very kind of distinct than Bitcoin. But what happens 99% of the time, guys, is that something will come along, in 2017 especially, that maybe is vaporware or has a totally crazy use case that just is that has no product market fit at all. Right, and these things just kind of, they kind of fizzle out and then, they drop dead, right? And that's what happens 98% of the time, right? So something like that might be, IOTA. Now, where does HEX fall into this? Well, remember that HEX is entering the market at a mature kind of phase, right? So a mature phase in the market. It's entering cryptocurrency 10 years after the invention of Bitcoin. So there's already all of that time where people have gotten used to and adapted to that paradigm, right? But now people are still speculating on HEX a lot as well. People are speculating because HEX itself is only about a year old, right? A little over a year. So people are speculating at the same time as there is an actual use case. And so HEX is actually doing both at the same time. Because as I'll get into later, the use case of HEX is actually wealth storage and wealth creation, right? It's a way to generate passive wealth over time, and it's trying to do that better than Bitcoin, which, again, we'll get into that later. But because it is only a year old, even though it's in a more mature market, people are still speculating on it, right? And they're doing both of these things simultaneously. So HEX kind of comes in and has simultaneous speculation and use case. And I think that's pretty cool. That's what we're witnessing right before us now. There's both. And you can trade it if you want to. We have all this volatility because of traders that are making the price do wild swings paired with, lower liquidity. Well, compared to Bitcoin again. Liquidity compared to other tokens, it's about average on Uniswap, right? But what if I told you that speculation is also a use case, right? So speculation is actually a use case too. It's just an early form stage of use case before a cryptocurrency can achieve the ideals that it was truly designed to achieve, right? So HEX has both going on right now. People are trading it, people are speculating, but they're also locking it up for years and years to gain interest, right? And making staking ladders and all these cool investment strategies that replicates what CDs do in the traditional financial system. Now, one interesting relationship is as the speculation to use case paradigm or spectrum progresses, so as people go from speculation to something achieving its actual use case, the volatility of the coin will actually go down. Now, we saw this in Bitcoin as well. Bitcoin, although it's still very highly volatile compared to, say, stonks, it's not nearly as volatile as it was in 2010, 2011, a couple of years after its creation. So you could see the same thing is kind of happening in HEX right now. There's lots of volatility because it's still early relative to its day zero, right? But it's coming in, and its day zero was actually year 10 for Bitcoin, right? So there's interesting things happening here, and I just thought that relationship was kind of interesting to point out. So what is the use case of HEX, right? We have a lot of haters out here and people that like to brush things off if they don't understand it or they don't want to understand it, right? But really the use case of HEX is all of these things, right? It can do all of these things and actually more that's really not on here. It can be a store of value, right? So it's a digital certificate of deposit replacing the traditional financial system by getting rid of middlemen, the way crypto was intended to always do. And it's more attractive to hold than Bitcoin because you can actually earn interest on it by hodling, right? Like, wouldn't that be great if you could just lock your Bitcoin away for 5 years and earn interest in the process, right? Because then you wouldn't have to be shaken out by all the volatility that comes along with a maturing product. Now, speculation, which as we've made the case for is actually a use case, that's currently a use case and it will continue to be because HEX has what's called price positive game theory built in, and it creates this price positive feedback loop. But even without all that stuff, it's only on year 1, whereas Bitcoin has had 10 years. So there's a potential for many more multiples of price, whereas Bitcoin reaching the more mature stage that it's in, you'd be lucky to get a 2 to 5x in Bitcoin's price during this next bull run. People always talk about crazy numbers, but the bigger something gets, the more economic energy it takes to lift that price up. And so at this point, the institutions are the only ones left to pump the bags of Bitcoin, right? Because they're the only ones with the money to actually market Bitcoin and make the price go up. But I digress, right? HEX was based on the principle that number go up is really one of the only things that matters in cryptocurrency, right? And a lot of people that are in HEX that are okay with HEX are okay with admitting this to themselves. I think a lot of people out there like to cover up the fact that they're really in crypto for the gains with complexity. They like to cover up their greed with technical complexity so they don't feel as bad. But you don't have to feel bad about it, guys. Crypto is a positive sum game because it's wealth creation and it's making a pie bigger where there was no pie before, right? So number go up is one of the most important things in cryptocurrency, and it's what sparks adoption, right? Speculation drives adoption, and if we ever want mass adoption of cryptocurrency, we're going to have to get more people in by speculating that the price can go higher, right? And the game theory is also built in as well. So like I said earlier, things like how if, for example, more people are staking, you'll have a lower interest rate. Well, that's a good thing because that means more people have entered the system and it's being adopted. Whereas vice versa, if less people are involved, you'll get a higher interest rate, which will attract, theoretically, more people to get in for those high interest rates. So it creates this price positive feedback loop. Whether or not people are in or out, there's always an incentive for more people to get in. Now we have payments, which is kind of a use case. I almost didn't even mention it on here, but I figured it was worth mentioning. It's meh. It's not really worth talking about too much. A lot of crypto people think that payments have to come first. Really, I think payments are one of the last things that's going to come out of crypto, right? But if you want payments, we do have it right now on Ethereum, which is interoperable with any ERC20 coin. We have zksync.io, which does 2,000 transactions per second. And nobody cares yet, right? No one's using it for that right now. Now, again, there's AML and KYC issues, which they're going to be big hurdles, right? Because at any point of sale, there's still whatever government or local jurisdiction you're in, you have to comply by those rules. And that kind of takes away from the decentralized and private self-sovereign aspect of cryptocurrency, if the government always has to know what you're doing. But I digress. Really, what HEX was created for, the use case, is not only store of value, but wealth generation. So it's storing value for the long term and creating passive wealth over time because you're earning interest while you have these coins locked up. Now, one of the really cool genius things about HEX is that unlike other staking coins, you get penalized if you pull it out early. So with other staking coins, I can unstake my coins whenever I want. And because I can do this, there's nothing stopping me from jumping ship and hopping over to the next thing and selling my coins whenever I want, which will sell the price down, right? So when you sell, the price goes down, obviously. In HEX, you're actually incentivized to hold for your full term because if you don't, you'll get penalized, and it can be a pretty big portion of your stack, if not all of it. And what's even more beautiful is that those penalties actually get routed to stakers who are fulfilling their promises, right? But that's a little bit too in-depth for right now. And most importantly, there's no counterparty risk, right? So not only was Hex audited 3 times, and it kind of kicked off the whole auditing craze in DeFi, which is a good thing, right? Things should get audited. But it's been audited 3 times by 2 of the most reputable firms in the crypto space, Chain Security and Chain Code Labs, I believe. And not to mention, there's no admin keys. You're not handing your private keys over, and there's nobody that can change up the code on you, right? It truly is immutable. So a lot of other fake DeFi, or CeFi as it's kind of called, is really just reinventing the wheel here. We're giving our money back to different central parties and just having the same counterparty risk as if nothing's changed, right? They might not call themselves banks, but they're essentially just new money managers that can be hacked or take your money or, use it in the wrong way or sell your data. And the whole reason of crypto was that it was designed to remove middlemen. So Hex does this in a trustless, decentralized way. Now, a lot of you are probably going to watch this and not agree, right? And that's okay. You can change your mind whenever you're ready to adapt to the new information that's out there, that's being handed to you. So Hex is only a year old, I get that. But part of seeing the use case in Hex starts with you believing that there actually can be something better than Bitcoin. Just like there was something better than the VCR. I don't see any VCR maximalists out there, because then DVDs came along and they were better. And then streaming came along and it was way better. Now you can stream whatever you want. You don't have to use a DVD player. So people can't see a use case in Hex because it actually is trying to eat Bitcoin's lunch. It's going for the exact same use case and trying to do it better with more features, right? And so this might scare some people and they might not want to hear it. But if you believe in the progression and evolution of technology, then it would be kind of silly to not admit to yourself that there are other things trying to do the same thing, and admitting the possibility that some of those might be able to do it better, right? Bitcoin has evolved and it's stagnated, it's ossified, it's crystallized. It's not going to get any significant updates anytime soon. And really all the developer activity, all the interoperability, so many good things are happening on the Ethereum network now, if you haven't already realized. And so, to quote Satoshi himself, if you can't see what's happening, if you don't believe me or you don't get it after this, I really don't have the time to explain it to you. So be careful if you can't see the use case of Hex, because technology doesn't care. It's going to move along without you, whether you're along for the ride or not, whether you can see the use case or not. And most importantly, whether or not you want to admit to yourself the truth that Hex's use case is the use case of Bitcoin. Hex just does it better.